So you've got your upstream Fedora images where everything is like all the hard stuff is being done.
Right. Now, remember, Fedora does not consider these images final, right? They're not doing this until Fedora 39. So these aren't official upstream Fedora images. They are Fedora images run on Fedora's GitLab by the guy who works on the official Fedora stuff, but this is like his setup. So that's one of the reasons, like this cycle, even though it's basically ready, we call it beta, you know, because we're not building off the official image. And there's actually been some users that someone found that their printer worked on the official image, but not our image. And I was so confused because that shouldn't be. And then eventually we figured that out, you know, because I do know some people on the team, but we also wanted to figure out stuff on our own unless we get really stuck, you know, and then we'll ask for help because, you know, we need them to like do the hard stuff so that we can do our bling. So I just want to make sure that people understand, you know, the Fedora project does not officially endorse any of this, and we're playing, you know, we're playing in a sandbox. So yes, that's where we start.
So,
and then you want to move on to the next one? Or?
So this takes us into the main images. So what is uBlue? What, to someone who has no idea what this project is, just let them know.
Yeah. We take all the annoying things in Fedora that they can't fix, and we fix those. Like if you go to YouTube and you say like the most annoying things of Fedora, they're going to list a thing that we attempt to fix.
That's the important part.
Yeah. I mean, try it. Like, you know, and then so before main there's actually another layer that we call config, and that's where we keep udev rules. That's why your if you install the Steam Flatpak, you won't get the window that says Steam device is missing because we just include that. Wooting keyboards we added, a bunch of stuff, and there's a whole repo by someone at Collabra. I think at Collabra, I don't know, maybe I'd have to check on that. There's a person that I've trusted, I've seen their name before, that maintains a GitLab repo of like every udev rule for every game controller. So I was like, we got to have that. So we actually pull from that every day. But we do have a gate in there. So, you know, if something bad gets in there, like we always kind of have to check before that gets automatic. It's in there. I can follow up in that. There's a few of them. I picked the person's name that I know.
I was trying to find the specific GitLab. The first one I find searching for is on Codeberg.
If you look in the container file in the config, it should be there.
Wait, maybe actually no, that might be a mirror of this. No, it is a mirror. Fabian.
Yeah, like I was confused. I was like, if someone knows what I'm supposed to be using, that one looks pretty good to maintain.
Fabian Bornschen? Sheen? Is that the same person?
No,
it doesn't matter. There's a bunch of
I'll investigate. We'll look into that.
There's probably forks.
And then that container is actually, it ends up being about 270 kilobytes.
Okay.
Of udev rules. But it's gold, those 270 kilobytes. And then the main repo is where we basically say, okay, we want to build 37, 38 of Silverblue, Kino White.
I say, I've never heard anyone say it. I don't know the correct way to say it. I just say it differently every time.
It's Kino White because I used to have the same problem.
I fixed the problem by just saying it differently every time. So I've got everyone.
Exactly. Yes, I've gone through that. Ceresia, which I don't know if I'm saying that right, but that's Sway. Because in Fedora, they have to have different names because that's what they decided to do.
Sure.
So they're just rolling with it. And then there's two that and then Voxite, which is XFCE.
Yep. Yeah.
And that one was
confused when I saw that.
Yeah. That one was done by someone who had been doing them on their own. I was like, hey, you want to join forces? And because it's easier when you share all the GitHub actions, right? And then actually Timothy from Fedora was like, hey, do you want to PR that into my more upstream thing? And then that way, when it's ready to go, that's less work because they're going to have to do one anyway, right? Yep. So I was like, cool. Maybe one of the things our project could do is be that kind of testing ground, for stuff like that, which is why I just finished Budgie last night. And I stayed up until like 4 a.m. to finish Budgie because Josh was like, it'd be pretty cool if you make one of these. I was like, man, you're right. So he is going to do it that way. But I busted out a uBlue image in like 3 hours. just so like we could try it and play with it and rebase to it and all that kind of stuff. So, so Voxsite started off as one of those, and then we have LXQt and Mate, which aren't in Fedora's compose thing, and we're actually building those with OS Tree, and those builds take probably 40 to 50 minutes to show you the difference between building something from scratch with OS Tree, like how a distro does it, versus just like modifying a container, which is like way faster. Right?
Yep.
So, but there's a reason that distros have to do it that way, because they have a whole bunch of stuff that they would get in trouble with that I don't get what we're doing, right? Like they have to have all that distro stuff. So then that's what we call the main images. So if you have an Intel or AMD GPU, this is what you want to roll. This is what you want to roll with. And there's very limited. There's some opinions that we take, but we try to keep them stock. There's a few things we change. Automatic updates have to be on by default. That's like the only hill I'll die on, because the pipeline has to work. Like it just has to work. Plus you have the rollback and the resilience and reliability. You know, it's once you get used to it, it's actually, it's the way to go. And anything with hardware enablement that sucks, you know, like part of the reason I was telling you earlier before we started, I want to get that OBS camera loopback working, because that's like AK mod. I want to get wireless Xbox controllers working, right? Because it doesn't take long. It's an out of tree thing you have to build, right? But we figured that out already. We just add more. So I want to do that.
I have an Xbox control here. I can't reach it. Whatever. I always use it wired.
You're right, because wired is just normal, right? That wireless thing is like man, that thing's a pain in the ass, right? But I was like, man, if we can do it, let's do it.
No, it'd definitely be cool if it could be done.
And then Nvidia is the one that's after. Now this is actually it started off as 134 lines, because on my blog post, my title was originally 134 lines of container file just saved the Linux desktop, you know. Yeah, hey, I learned something from you YouTubers, man. You got to be a little bit you got to be saucy. You got to get attention, you know. I got to compete with your Hawaiian shirts. It's not 134 lines now. That thing's a monster, man. But hey, better to have one place to do it. So what's cool about the Nvidia thing is, so we build it for you, and then we have different streams. So we have what are the latest versions?
Before we go too far down that,
sure.
What were you missing that let you only have 134 lines initially?
I'd have to look.
Oh, okay.
Well, we weren't doing multiple versions. There were multiple things. Like, do we do RPM Fusion? There was another repo. We tried to, for a while, we were trying to just build it ourselves.
Right.
Because you could do anything you want in the container files or whatever. So, I mean, that wasn't me. That was the people with engineering. I'm fortunate because a lot of people that work on uBlue like do engineering as their job, right? So Josh works at Red Hat, Alex works at Amazon, Brian works at Amazon. But we have a lot of people who also don't work in the industry, so it's like a great mix of you know, can we do this crazy stuff? I was like, oh man, I don't think that kid just realized what he's asking for. And then the next day someone's like, hey, I did this, and I was like, wow, that totally unlocks the possibility to do with that. With that guy was I mean, you never know, right? So and the thing is, once you figure it, it's like, hey man, we just got to get the thing building, and then we're good to go, right? But then later it's like, well, if we totally redo it, then we'll be able to do multiple driver streams. And at first I was like, I don't know, man, don't you always kind of want to be on current? But actually around that time, Liam from Gaming on Linux tweeted, because he's on Fedora. He was like, my shit was working perfectly on Friday and it doesn't today. And I was like, dude, if you could rebase back to that image, I think I could help fix that, right? Like, so we actually build all the supported NVIDIA ones. So if you want to go back to 470, hold on, let me see. We actually build so many versions of the tags that they don't show up in the display on GitHub. Like we have to figure that out, right? Because what we do is we tag everything with the major version,
right? The
version of the driver, right? And aliases for those. So if you always want to be on the current NVIDIA driver, you stay on 38-current, right? But it also has to have 38-570 or whatever the major release is. So if you want to stay locked to that, you can, right? Additionally, we put a date tag on it right? So if you want to go back to what 470 looked like on Fedora 37 2 Thursdays ago, you could totally go there, right? See why this is cool?
Yeah,
you see why this is cool? Yeah. So like, I was like, hey man, if we just have all the supported versions of all the stuff, and you could go back, it's like having a time machine, right? And the nice part is your apps and all that stuff is decoupled. That's why Flatpaks are key to this thing, right? Like a lot of people, we could have all of this. Why do we need sandboxing and blah, 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 blah? That's exactly why. It has to be a separate layer. That's that cloud native thing, man. You got to decompose and
we'll eventually get to
you
it.
Layer stuff. You can swap stuff out. And as long as the Lego holes and pegs are the same size, you don't care what brick is in there. Know what I'm saying? So like, yes, we can totally do that. But will it actually work in practice? That's why we've been taking our time, right? That's this entire, like we got this working actually a while ago, right? But you have to set people's expectations, right?
Yep.
And remember, our job is to make the pipeline resilient and make that work, right? If you were destined to get an Nvidia Wayland bug that day, you're going to get an Nvidia Wayland bug that day. I just make sure it got to you and you didn't break your package management. Or I mean, this is a lot bigger than me, you know, like the initial people were like 5 or 6 people, but they're cloud people, so they're very efficient. So we spent actually more time on the automation itself than the actual product. That's why the images are so kind of rough, right? They're not as like if you load Bluefin, like there's a lot of polish and stuff that you need. That's because we're concentrating on the, you know, like if you put Bluefin next to Vanilla OS any day of the week, like wallpapers are amazing. The workflow's nice. They know how to write GNOME apps. Ours is like, my friend Marco literally learned GTK in like a weekend. You know, and you can like, you know, because we're automation. We want to be the DevOps teams for a desktop, you know? So that's why we have all these images. And at some point someone says, I want to take that. I'm going to make that the most awesome tiling window manager experience available. That's why we're making the toolkit part. So someone else can go that last, you know, because at that point, that's, we know what we got to do, right? Like our scope, we actually went back and we wrote this down. Important. If you ever start your own open source project, write down your scope and your mission. That way you don't get any bright ideas. And next thing you know,
this is
like,
this is not just
Linux desktop is our entire mission. Like, no,
this is not just an open source thing. This is also going back to that project I was mentioning earlier, where I was doing some stuff for the CSIRO. I was the lead dev and the project manager.
You don't want that.
And the client didn't know what they wanted. So make sure you set what your goals are, because it will get really bad if you don't. Yeah.
I mean, for sure, right? And like at some point, like we're getting enough people now. Like I'm looking forward to removing my access from the repos. Like I shouldn't be checking code like at all, you know? But luckily it's cloud tech, so you can kind of understand a Docker file. I know enough bash scripting, you know? And when there is something you don't know, that's what you have a community for, you know? Like, hey, who knows Python? I do. Does this make sense? Cool. You're a maintainer now. What? Sorry. Be careful with that. Yeah. Like if you're like, I want to get into open source, you want to be good. You don't want to be too good, because then you get stuck maintaining something. You want to be a healthy driver.
And then 3 years later, you write a blog post being like, I hate all of these corporations stealing my code.
Yeah. Or if you're lucky, you get to work for one of them, which is cool. I've done both. You know, get yours. That's one of the reasons I wanted to bring this cloud stuff kind of back. You know, irrespective of the economy today, is cloud developers just enjoy so much more professional and personal success. You know, generally speaking, than desktop people. I've worked with both sets. They're both brilliant, right? Open source is taking over the world. It kind of sucks, right? That like, if you really want to succeed as an open source developer, you kind of have to move to cloud or some place that is. They're fortunate people, right? Like, I'm sure some of you had, I want to run the desktop team at Red Hat. That sounds freaking cool, right? Like, you know, but when you look at the math and the numbers, right? It's like most people have to. That's where I'm actually running into more Debian developers than I ever have. It's at cloud conferences. You know, but like, so, you know, in a way, having started off in Linux desktop, done the cloud thing, and kind of I'm still doing the cloud thing, but kind of be more interested in the desktop is like, how do we break ourselves out of this loop, you know? So I'm like, well, I'm gonna, I know this model works in cloud and mobile, so let's give it a shot, you know? And then like, a lot of it is rough edges, and I get that, right? But at some point it becomes easier to fix the rough edges than to, like, no one should be using PP. Man, I was there when PPAs were made. Like, you don't want to be using those anymore. Please trust me.
So we got very sidetracked from.
Oh yeah. You can cut all that out. I don't know what your time.
No. I've got. We can. I don't know if I mentioned before. I just go wherever. The podcast is tech over tea, but I've gone on rants about things that don't matter whatsoever. It's all as long as it's entertaining. Are you
even drinking tea? I don't even see.
I've got an empty teacup here.
Okay,
and I've got some empty vodka cans here. But no, I'm not. I've got water.
Amazing.
Anyway, so we got to the Nvidia images, and then under that, and then theoretically there could be other images. Like
there could. The reason we put RockM there is like, what if someone wants this?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't think we should sign up for that, but if somebody shows up, absolutely.
If someone wants to maintain it,
that sounds great. And then after that, actually, we should change this. There's a separate repo called Starting Point, right? And that's where we want. Okay, so there's the images. That's cool, but you also have to have the kit, right? Because part of the reason I got annoyed by everyone saying you can't customize immutable Linux distros. And
I've heard this a lot of times.
It's not the same thing, So I was like, fine, nerds, we'll have to make you a thing, so I can actually move on with my life. So we started this, and it's kind of more of a strip down, because Main and Nvidia are doing complicated stuff. There's like a matrix of images to build, and generally speaking, you just want to take that thing, add the 3 or 4 things that you need, and then move on. So you clone that, and then that brings all the actions and all of that stuff over to your GitHub repo. You have to change the private key because we want you to sign your images. Otherwise, that won't work. And then you change, I want Emacs instead of Vim, or Micro instead of Vim, and then boom, you're publishing your own images. And there are people doing that now. It's just a matter of getting the docs into shape and better tooling, and like cosine broke for a little while for people. We were trying to figure it out. So it's still kind of early days on that, but ideally, like, Starting Point is going to be the thing that, all of that toolkit part is going to be the thing, or someone else is not going to be me. I'm hoping to be retired by then, that will go and actually take and actually make a cool, like, I'm hoping someone makes a Cosmic one, because I did Budgie, so someone has to go make Cosmic, right?
That would be cool.
And just do it, like, it's still relatively difficult for some people, but it is way easier than making your own distro, and you don't fall into the distro mistakes.